Hey all, welcome to your lesson on thinking, problem solving, and biases. So this lesson is chunked into three parts, three pretty small parts. So we're going to start off with creativity. What's creativity and what are two kinds of thinking? So creativity is the ability to produce new or novel and valuable, useful ideas. Convergent thinking, so getting into the two different kinds, there's convergent and divergent thinking. Convergent thinking is narrowing the available problem solutions down to determine the single best solution. So convergent, connecting to come together to one. Divergent, expanding, diverging, going apart, expanding the number of possible problem solutions, and creative thinking that expands in different directions. So you could relate this to what you know about earth science, convergent boundaries and divergent. Oh, there's the hand dryer. Convergent coming together, divergent going apart. Some examples of convergent thinking: aptitude tests such as the SAT typically require convergent thinking, which is an ability to provide a single correct answer, so narrowing down to one. Where divergent thinking, creativity tests, how many uses can you think of for a brick, for example? And we're going to do some cool different stations with problem solving in class that kind of explain and show these different types of thinking. So the ability to consider many options and to think in novel ways. Novel meaning new. 5 components of creativity according to Robert Sternberg: expertise, imaginative thinking skills, a venturesome personality, intrinsic motivation, and a creative environment. A venturesome personality seeks new experiences, tolerates ambiguity and risk, and perseveres in overcoming obstacles. Princeton mathematician Andrew Wiles pondered for more than 30 years a mathematical puzzle left by Pierre de Fermat, a 17th century mischievous mathematical genius. Wiles said he labored in near isolation from the math community, partly to stay focused and avoid distraction. Imaginative thinking. So cartoonists often display creativity as they see things in new ways or make unusual connections. Well, I told you to add yeast to your shampoo. How to boost your creativity. So everyone can boost your creativity. Develop your expertise. This second one is the second and third are so key. Actually, they're all key. Never mind, they're all key. Some are easier to achieve than others, though. Allow time for incubation. Think hard on a problem and then set it aside and come back to it later. Oftentimes nowadays we're moving so fast that we want to just figure out the answer and move on. Well, that is not how to boost creativity. This next one, setting aside time for the mind to roam freely, that, you guys, is one of the main reasons of solo time. You can boost creativity just by sitting and doing nothing. Let your mind roam freely and you'll be so surprised what comes up. And super important, experience other cultures and other ways of thinking. It's going to expose you to so many different types of things that you would not have been exposed to if you're just hiding out in your own little world. All right, so now we're going to move into problem solving. So there's a couple different types of problem solving strategies: an algorithm and a heuristic. An algorithm is a methodical, logical rule or step-by-step procedure that guarantees solving a particular problem. A heuristic is a simple thinking strategy that often allows us to make judgments and solve problems efficiently, usually speedier but also more error-prone than an algorithm. So some examples: an algorithm, when asked to open an unused locker in the school hallway, you try every combination in a specific order until you find the solution. Whereas heuristic, when asked to open an unused locker, you stop by the main office to see if the secretary has a list of combinations. Which one's quicker? Heuristic. What is insight? So a sudden realization of a problem solution contrasts with strategy-based solutions. Sometimes no problem-solving strategies, such as algorithms or heuristics, seems to be at work at all, and we arrive at a solution to a problem in a quick instance. These are what we like to call light bulb or aha moments. Insight strikes suddenly with no prior sense of getting warmer or feeling close to a situation. It just suddenly hits you. Research on insight. Researchers ask people to think of a word that forms a compound word or phrase with each of 3 other words in a set, such as pine, crab, and sauce, and to press a button to sound a bell when they knew the answer. A sudden aha insight led to about half of the solutions. Well, what's happening in the brain? Before the aha moment, the problem solver's frontal lobes, which is involved in focusing attention, were active. At the instant of discovery, there was a burst of activity in the right temporal lobe, just above the ear. Psychologist Wolfgang Kohler placed a piece of fruit and a long stick outside the cage of a chimpanzee named Sultan beyond his reach. Inside the cage, Kohler placed a short stick, which Sultan grabbed, using it to try to reach the fruit. After several failed attempts, the chimpanzee dropped the stick and seemed to survey the situation. Then suddenly, as if thinking, aha, Sultan jumped up, seized the short stick again. This time he used it to pull in the longer stick, which he then used to reach the fruit. So we've got frontal lobe and then right temporal lobe. All right, 3 obstacles to problem solving are confirmation bias, fixation, and mental set. Again, you're gonna do examples of all of these in the stations that we're gonna do in class. It's a super fun station activity. All right, confirmation bias is a tendency to search for information that supports our preconceptions and to ignore or distort contradictory evidence. Why we look only for supporting evidence. Confirmation bias leads us to seek evidence for our ideas more eagerly than we seek evidence against them. Fixation is the inability to see a problem from a new perspective, an obstacle to problem solving. If you can't see it from a new perspective, then you're not going to be able to do problem solving. You're not going to be able to solve the problem. Ignore the text underneath this because we aren't doing that. A mental set is a prime example of fixation. A prime example of fixation is mental set, our tendency to approach a problem with the mindset of what's worked for us previously. So we have ideas in our head about what has worked for us. That's in our mind. And so that is an example of fixation. We're pulling from something that's worked in the past. Intuition is an effortless, immediate, automatic feeling or thought as contrasted with explicit conscious reasoning. So 2 intuitive mental shortcuts. These fall under heuristic, and there's now 2 different types: representativeness heuristic and availability heuristic. Representativeness heuristic is estimating the likelihood of events in terms of how well they seem to represent or match particular prototypes. They may lead us to ignore other relevant information. Availability heuristic is estimating the likelihood of events based on their availability in memory. So availability heuristic, availability in memory. If instances come readily to mind, perhaps because they were vivid memories, then we presume such events are common. So how can the representativeness heuristic lead to stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination? Consider the reaction of some non-Arab travelers soon after 9/11 when a young male of Arab descent boarded their plane. The young man fit or represented their terrorist prototype, and the representativeness heuristic kicked in. His presence evoked anxiety among his fellow passengers, even though nearly 100% of those who fit this prototype are peace-loving citizens. Consider this. One mother of 2 black and 3 white teens asks other parents, "Do you store personnel follow your children when they are picking out their Gatorade flavors? They didn't follow my white kids." Do your kids get pulled out of the TSA line time and again for additional screaming? My white kids didn't. The end result, if people have a prototype, a stereotype of delinquent Black teens or terrorist Arabs, they may unconsciously use their representative heuristic when judging individuals. The result, even if unintended, and this is so important, even if it's not intended, it is still racism. How can representativeness heuristic aid in problem solving? Well, if a young man wants to win the affections of a young woman, he may notice that she plays on the varsity basketball team and frequently wears Celtics jerseys to school. The young woman, excuse me, the young woman fits the young man's idea of an athlete, and so he buys 2 tickets to the NBA Finals and asks her if she would like to go. His behavior, buying the tickets, is based on how well the young woman represents his concept of sport-loving athlete. He believes she will say yes because that is his based on his prototype. And of course, she does. Availability heuristic. So estimating the likelihood of events based on how fast they come to mind, their availability in memory. So if instances come readily to mind, perhaps because of their vividness, then we presume such events are common. Make sure you understand the difference between these two for the AP exam. These are definitely a pair of confusing terms. Moving back into fear, we often fear the wrong things. In 2015 and again in 2016, feared Islamic terrorists shot and killed fewer Americans than did armed toddlers. Don't believe everything you think. What are we afraid of? In the 3 months after 9/11, fear of flying led more Americans to travel by car and some to die. We fear what our ancestral history has prepared us to fear. Snakes, lizards, and spiders combined now kill a tiny fraction of the number killed by modern-day threats, such as cars and cigarettes. Ancestral risks also prepare us to fear confinement and heights, and therefore flying. We fear what we cannot control. Driving, we control. Flying, we do not. We fear what is immediate. Dangers of flying are mostly in the moments of takeoff and landing, and dangers of driving are spread across many moments, each trivially dangerous. Why do we fear the wrong things? Thanks to the availability heuristic, we fear what is most readily available in our memory. So vivid images of horrific airline crashes feed our judgments of risk. Shark attacks kill less than or around 1 American per year. There's a vivid image. Heart disease kills 800,000 Americans per year. That's harder to visualize. People may fear sharks more than cigarettes or the effects of an unhealthy diet. How does the availability heuristic add to our fears? Well, how are our decisions and judgments affected by overconfidence? Overconfidence is the tendency to be more confident than correct. More confident than correct, to overestimate the accuracy of our beliefs and judgments. Sometimes our decisions and judgments go awry simply because we are more confident than correct. Overconfidence also often leads to a planning fallacy. This is overestimating our future leisure time and income as an example. Students and others often expect to finish assignments ahead of schedule. In fact, projects generally take about twice the predicted time. And anticipating how much more time we will have next month, we happily accept invitations and believing we'll surely have more money next year, we take out loans or buy on credit. Those are all examples of planning fallacy. What is belief perseverance? Well, clinging to one's initial conceptions after the basis on which they were formed has been discredited. The more we come to appreciate why our beliefs might be true, the more tightly we cling to them. For instance, in politics, once we have explained to ourselves why candidate X or Y will be a better commander-in-chief, we tend to ignore evidence undermining our belief. What research has been conducted on belief perseverance? A classic study of belief perseverance engaged people with opposing views of capital punishment. After studying two supposedly new research findings, one supporting and the other refuting the claim that the death penalty deters crime, each side was more impressed by the study supporting its own beliefs, and each readily disputed the other's study. What's the takeaway? Well, showing the pro and anti-capital punishment groups, the same mixed evidence actually increased their disagreement. Rather than using evidence to draw conclusions, they use their conclusions to assess evidence, a phenomenon also known as motivated reasoning. Framing is the way an issue is posed. How an issue is worded can significantly affect decisions and judgments. What sounds more like something you might agree with? Gun safety or gun control laws, undocumented workers or illegal aliens, carbon offset fee or carbon tax. Those are ways that words have a different and more powerful meaning in some instances. Framing is the way we present an issue, and it can be a powerful tool of persuasion. Imagine two surgeons explaining the risk of an upcoming surgery. One explains that during this type of surgery, 10% of people die. The other explains that 90% survive. The information is the same. The effect is not. In real-life surveys, patients and physicians overwhelmingly say the risk is greater when they hear that 10% die. How do smart thinkers use intuition? Well, implicit knowledge that we've recorded in our brains but can't fully explain shows itself in the smart and quick judgments of experienced nurses, firefighters, art critics, car mechanics. To make adaptive and quick decisions, intuition allows us to go with our gut, recognize stranger danger when we see it. Our mind's unconscious track makes good use intuitively of what we are not consciously processing. Unconscious automatic influences are constantly affecting our judgment. This is the last slide, and this is printed in your notes. And this gives you the process or strategy, all the main points from today's lesson. This also gives you a description, and then it gives you powers and perils of those descriptions. So we will go over this in class with some mini experiments, and then we'll jump into stations. This is a lesson that I have kept just over 17 minutes, friends. Have a great day.